So welcome to this review of the second half of the year. If you haven't seen the first review of the first 6 or 7 months, do go back and check that. We're going to start, in fact, here around about my birthday at the end of July, when we were in Northern Ireland, and then my review here of Brendan Sanderson and the Final Empire. So this was a very interesting read that we did. From there, we went back to Belgium, and here you see the Maas and other things. We also had a second week staying in Antwerp in the Grote Markt. And then after that, we went on to the Belgian coast, where we had a very pleasant week with a family up at the Belgian coast. From there, we went back to Hollywood and Belfast. This was, as you see, in September, beginning of September. We spent a while back with our family in Belfast. And then from there, we headed on to Malta. And this was the first of several weeks, mid-September, that we spent in Malta. So this you might recognize as being the Dome. And here are cities out and about around the 3 cities and where you go from there. So these were a number of weeks that we spent out and about in Malta, right through until the end of October. So this was the end of October. This was, in fact, no, this was the end of September. In fact, it was, as you see, the 1st of October when I posted this. When we left, we headed back and we spent yet another week back with family in Hollywood and Belfast. So that was here. This you might recognize as being the Old Priory Inn, which is the Old Priory, which is actually potentially the origin of the name of Hollywood, which is Holy Wood, Sanctus Boscus. So there you go. From there, we headed out back east again, as the world was opening up, and we were among the first tourists to get into Bangkok with no restrictions, which was obviously quite pleasant. And this you might recognize as being Siam, around Siam. From a week in Bangkok was enough, and then we headed down to Phuket, which is the island in the south, and that was a very pleasant time. And we had several weeks, in fact, in Phuket. Here we were around Rawai, which is where we were staying. This here was Nai Harn Beach. And then from there, we stayed on for the eclipse, which happened. The eclipse combined with the Loy Krathong festival, which was very pleasant, and that wrapped up our stay down in the south of Thailand. From there, we headed back up to the very north of Thailand, which is up in Chiang Mai. And this is, in fact, one of the renovated temples that you see here in Chiang Mai. We had a very pleasant stay in Chiang Mai. From there, we headed down, again, south of Bangkok, to a place called Hua Hin, which is about 3 hours drive south of Bangkok. We had a very pleasant time there at the beach. And then from there, we headed over to Kuala Lumpur, where I had to go, obviously, to collect my suitcase that I left before the pandemic nonsense. But it was nice to get that back, and very nice to meet up with many of my friends. And then finally here at the beginning of December, you see here around the 10th of December, we actually came back to Hong Kong. And we came back to, as you see, very, very, very pleasant weather. The following week, we were sort of reassessing things and seeing how the situation had developed. Fairly obvious if you look around and read this for more. And then from there on, we got up to Christmas. And this was Christmas Eve. This is one of many of these extravagant Christmas decorations that you'll see in the shopping malls around here. And anyway, let's now go through the other articles. So if I go back again to the first one, which was here at the beginning of August, you'll see that, as I said, it should be fairly clear that the Great Reset is now well in progress. This was my review of Mistborn. And a second book that I was reading was the Uncommunist Manifesto, which I highly recommend you get your hands on if you haven't already done so. This is one of many illustrations from the book. And in subsequent here in this article and subsequent ones, I will link back on that. This is a good sort of set of wisdom if you haven't seen it before, and updates on my projects, which are worth listening to. If we move on then back in Belgium, we came back to Belgium, and the book that I was reading that week was Talking to My Daughter by Yanis Varoufakis. Yanis is a very interesting character. I certainly don't agree with everything in his philosophy. In fact, a lot of his more recent philosophy I don't appreciate. However, he does go through a very interesting expose as to how he sees society evolved and how we ended up in the situation that we're in now. So that's an interesting book. This is also a particularly interesting article, Adventures in CFA, Colonie Française d'Afrique. Again, read in there if you want more. And keep in mind that what we're going through is something that has been seen well before and is well documented, not least here, as you see in the lead up to the American Constitution. This was all Bitcoin stuff, I think. If I move on again, we then moved on to Antwerp, and here we were in the Grote Markt. At this point, I was reading the book Why We Sleep, which is a book I highly recommend by Matthew Walker. What else did we say? Yeah, I was also looking into lucid dreaming, which is something that if you haven't done, you should definitely try. And if you have done, reach out to me and let me know. And then here, updates on some projects, including the fact that you can have the newsletters read to you, which is interesting. And they're also now translated into multiple languages. So yeah, Ethereum Merge was just about to come up at that stage, blah, blah. So we move on, then we were at the Belgian coast. This is a very famous landmark at the Belgian coast. We did actually spend time up with family at the Belgian coast, which was really, really nice. A book that I was rereading was Snow Crash. And if you have not already read Snow Crash, you absolutely should read it. It's a seminal article in terms of metaverse, and you absolutely need to read this. Gotta wonder how he came up with all of these things, but very, very interesting. Project updates, including searching and how you can do anonymous searching. And then Bitcoin on Lightning, many, many things. Interesting look on the Lightning Network, Ethereum Merge continuing. And yeah, that was the update from that week. Then we were back in Hollywood, the beginning of September for a while. You might recognize this place, a very famous pier in the town of Hollywood, into Belfast Lough. A book I was reading at this stage was The New Confessions of an Economic Hitman, which again is absolutely a book that you should read. It will open your eyes as to how the world really works. And let me not spoil the plot there. Bitcoin and Lightning, a series of very interesting interviews, and we were leading up to the Sibos conference at this stage. Ethereum Merge was on the go, so this was obviously very interesting. And Alice in Wonderland is an interesting book, one of many books that I think the story is deeper than you imagine. And then we finished up here on a number of fun finds. These were very interesting looks on history of different countries that we have visited. So then we moved on to Malta. This was in September. Malta, as you see, is a very sort of medieval type of city. It's really very, very interesting place altogether. And at this stage, I actually switched from books to watching a couple of TV series. I don't have a TV, but these are recordings that you can readily watch. So this, in fact, is The Prisoner, which is a very, very famous series from 1967, 68. If you haven't watched these, I recommend that you do. And the book that I was reading at the time was Weird Sisters, which is interesting. And there is a fantastic animated movie if you want to click through to that. A little bit more expose on Alice in Wonderland here. Update on the Bitcoin and Lightning network. This is how the insight that you can see on the network. It's interesting to see how much the capacity of the network has increased since September when I took this snapshot. Ethereum merge, yes, was still on the go, as you can imagine. And then from here we went on to, still in Malta. This was a little bit further out from the three cities. This is, a very strange creature, obviously in the square. We'll not talk more about that here. You can read about it in the article. The book that I was reading at the time was Martha Wells' All Systems Red, which is the first of the Murderbot diaries. And that was a super interesting book that I recommend. I do recommend it. It's kind of something completely different that I would not normally read. And I started publishing here some information about how you can make sure that your phone is private if you're concerned about tracking. And this is something which I'm sure we're going to come back to in the weeks and months ahead. The Ethereum merge did actually finally happen, and more on that obviously will follow. And this was an interesting thing that you may have come across, which is the synchronization between the movie The Wizard of Oz and the Pink Floyd LP or CD of The Dark Side of the Moon. So that is super interesting. And here below, you'll see, in fact, all of the synchronization points. Pink Floyd themselves have said this is not something that they did, but you've got to wonder. Huh? Just check out these sync points. Huh? If we move on, we were still in Malta the next week in Marcia, Cala, Gozo, and we also had the equinox, which is obviously an important date. This was a fabulous cafe where Vivian and I had breakfast, and I do recommend you check out the little explainer of the owner here, which was very interesting as to why he opened this and how he does it. Discovery of the week was this Buteyko breathing, which again, I'll let you click through and read. Fascinating. Another one of these things that you've never been told, and suggest you check it out, especially if you've got asthma or you know somebody who does. The book that I was reading at this time is Sorcery or Sorcery, another one of Terry Pratchett's books. So again, a fascinating book. And here we hit Neil Oliver, and Neil begins to say some things that I think you want to click through and watch. And this is a fascinating little example here. If you think you're good at spotting things, try having a look at this and see what you think. So moving on, we were still there at the very end of September. We're still in Malta, enjoying the fabulous weather. This is from the city looking over to the three cities on the other side. The book that I was reading at this stage was Men at Arms, which again is another one I absolutely recommend, and the Uncommunist Manifesto from Mark Moss and Svetsky. So those I definitely recommend. Also, this book here, When Money Dies, it is kind of rather relevant to current purposes. And we did discuss this in a bit more detail back in issue 7, back in February. What else is interesting down here? The merge. Yeah, the consequences of this merge become a bit more clear. And yeah, Guy also explained why the British pound had the crisis that it had, if you remember, when the Bank of England had to jump in. From there, we headed back at the beginning of October. We headed back to Hollywood and Belfast, visiting family. And you see here the Old Priory on a sunny day, which happens from time to time. This is a rather important video, and I do recommend you click through and watch this. It's Dr. Aseem Malhotra, and this was kind of his coming out, where he really started to turn around from his active promotion of the vaccines to realizing, in fact, how much damage these are probably doing to most people. So you do want to watch this and understand he is a cardiologist, and he is famous for being the one who was most active in terms of promoting this. And he's now probably one of the most ardent skeptics. So credit to him, and you can read his papers here. The links to the papers are here. The expose is another interesting site. And in terms of books, I was refreshing my mind on the sovereign individual at this stage. And it's always good to go to the Mises Institute website. You can click here. Super interesting place to follow. And here, George Gammon does also an expose in terms of what happened with the Bank of England. We had the Italian election and a few interesting comments here. And then part of a regular series of insights from Max Igan, broadcasting from Mexico. And yeah, this is the first of a series of interesting things that I highlighted in terms of rituals that you'll see ongoing. More on that in the subsequent weeks. And also some interesting things. These may just be mathematical curiosities. But when you go a bit deeper into this one here, I think you'll find some things that you really do not fully understand. As I said, then we were then in Bangkok. This is the usual evening traffic situation around Siam. We spent a little bit of time in Bangkok, and you see here plenty of pictures from the week or so we were there. Yeah, we were looking at Hong Kong at this stage, and obviously not much was happening. This 500,000 tickets, yeah, whistle for that. Isaiah's Job is an interesting article from Alex Svetsky. So I do recommend you read the articles that are linked here. They're super interesting. And the book that I was reading, or rereading, in fact, was Jeff Booth's article, The Price of Tomorrow. Absolutely recommended reading. Get it, listen to it, and then open your eyes and look around. Reminding you to reread When Money Dies, and then again, updates on the projects. And at this stage, I was starting a series of explaining what is money and things that you've probably not been taught over the years. So quite a series of things here. Yeah, colder weather approaching in Thailand. Obviously, this is a joke. It never quite snows in Thailand. And then a few more interesting links, which I'll let you check. This is interesting. This lady, all power to her, from Ireland, has been an outspoken voice of reason in the European Commission. And just like recent things, people do not want to listen, which is not great. And then this is an interesting thing. If you can solve this, do tell me. It's an interesting guy called Unico Sobreviviente, which means sole survivor. Anyway, you can click through here, and if you know the explanation, you let me know. The best explanation I have is here. From there, we went on down south of Thailand to Phuket. This is obviously at the airport. And I continued my series on what is money. So a number of articles based on Lynn Alden's paper, which I recommend you read. We also talk about money in Bitcoin, which I think is good for you to know. You will see here how the value of your dollar has been debased, and you'll understand that this is in fact by design of fiat money. And this in fact leads to a lot of dysfunctional events, which you'll see if you look around you today. A lot of information here, which I recommend that you go back and read, including comparing gold to money, and then comparing Bitcoin to the criteria of good or excellent money. So that I recommend you read. This is also an interesting thing that you may or may not know. It's all related to statins and what I would call, and Seyfedin also calls, the great cholesterol con. So do go back and listen to this interview with Dr. Malcolm Kendrick in the UK. Highly recommend that. Another excellent interview with, or a keynote address, in fact, by Michael Saylor, which is worth watching. And then some other interesting things which are very important. This is a very interesting little series of events here that you can watch. And yeah, this video that I shared from a little millennial YouTuber, I actually got a lot of positive feedback. So I recommend you go back and check this just to see how millennial minds work, plus a couple of other ones that I follow. And yes, it did occur to me that these are all women, and you read here some thoughts on that. Still in Phuket, this is at Rawai Beach, which is where we were staying. We also visited the Naka Market up in Old Phuket. And at this point, one of my former work colleagues unearthed a piece of paper that he'd found from a workshop that I had done 14 years ago. So this is a little bit of insight, which was interesting. And this prompted me, in fact, to go back and look at this Enneagram. Enneagram is one of a number of personality typing and insight tools, a little bit like MBTI and Myers-Briggs and so on. So interesting. If you have not done this, do it, and perhaps you might recognize me in the description that follows, and do click through here to find a little bit more deeper discussion on that. We then continued with a little bit more clarification and discussion around Bitcoin, including reminding you of this cover from The Economist from a number of years ago, which you can go back and check. I think by the way, there's a lot of symbolism in here that we can discuss in subsequent newsletters. This is an interesting, MacroJack is a very interesting newsletter on Substack that you can read. And this analogy of Plato's cave, I think, is very relevant. Ivor Cummins has actually done a 2-year review of his data, sort of sanity check, which I recommend you check out. And again, further insights from Max. This was an interesting one on how modern history, in fact, changes the definition of things. So Halloween and All Hallows Eve. Yeah, watch it, click it, watch it, and you make up your own mind. We were at this point leading into the eclipse, obviously, which was important. And then this was a most interesting discussion on this bent pyramid, which, yeah. Anyway, click the article and you will understand. And not entirely unrelated to this is a series of interesting stuff from a guy called Jason Brashears, who has a website called archaics.com. So I will let you read that. Then a week later, this was beginning of November, we were down at Nihorn Beach, which was obviously very pleasant. And I started out here with a number of important references. These are actually books from my library. The Fiat Standard, The Creature from Jekyll Island, When Money Dies, The Report from Iron Mountain, and Sun Tzu's Art of War. If you haven't read these, you really must. And again, you can click through and I have summaries of these. Also click through to what the American Constitution, the writers of the Constitution had in mind when they wrote it. And you may well want to go back and rewatch The Matrix, the movie. Highly recommend. Certainly the first one is quite easy to see and to understand. And it's a little bit like that moment in the Sixth Sense movie where you kind of don't see it. And then at a certain point you do see it. And then once you see it, you cannot unsee it. So if you have not seen it yet, go back and rewatch the series or click here for the explainer. Here I discussed a little bit more about Halloween and then updates on the projects and including Lightning. This was an interesting discussion with some of the technology around Lightning that I'm looking at. And yeah, more here. Saifedean on what's happening in Europe, which is obviously why is Europe in such a mess? This is a rather clear explanation. And yeah, this is the thing that you're going to see. This is going to be the theme of 2023, at least one of the themes that we're supposed to believe. So, and then I highlight an interesting YouTuber that I've discovered, which is Lei, L-E-I, Lei's Real Talk. So you can check this out. She has a very interesting podcast. And yeah, a rather inconvenient opinion here about what's going on around here, which you can check out. And this is a rather thought-provoking article, which leads into several other things. So again, check that out if you need. Then actually we had the eclipse, and this is a sort of representation of what tends to happen around eclipse times. And of course, right on cue, Sam Bankman-Fried and FTX collapsed, as you would expect. Something of that nature would have happened. We also had the Loy Krathong Festival in Thailand, which was really, really fabulous. We had a tremendous time. If I read on down here, I had more to say around CBDCs, also around the Great Reset, which is ongoing. And yes, this rise of the biomedical security state, which I think is highly relevant, and you should be well aware of what's happening. And again, plenty of links, including this dear lady here, Christine Anderson, who's a member of the European Parliament, also very outspoken. So from Germany, I do recommend that. Neil frequently tries to, again, alert people to what's happening. So again, if you need links or references, do check out his website. Yeah, and this was how we saw the eclipse. You can see here, it was kind of cloudy, so we didn't really see the eclipse so well in Thailand. But yeah, there you go. And then in terms of rituals, this, you probably missed this, but I missed it because it happened on my birthday, but it was the opening ceremony of the Commonwealth Games. And I do recommend that you click through and you read or you watch that explainer. And obviously that followed on from the other ritual, which you probably did see, which was the opening ceremony of the 2010 Olympics. So again, if you've not seen these rituals, you should go through, and as a minimum, they should give you some pause for thought, as should the cover of The Economist. So this is the Economist cover as it was shown. And if you reverse it, this in fact is what you get. And again, if you click through here, you will see, again, plenty of explanation and symbolism, including ritualistic symbolism that was shown before the pandemic started. So you want to give that some thought. From there, we went on mid-November. We were up in Chiang Mai in the north of Thailand. And this temple, in fact, which is Wat Phra Singh, has been completely renovated and made golden. I think this was done, in fact, for the new king. We obviously are looking for other locations, and this is the climate in northern Thailand, which is quite nice. Here you've got a few pictures around Chiang Mai, just so that you can get a feel of the place and what it looks like. And yeah, this was a very interesting series of articles from Alan Farrington on how the FTX collapse had happened. Saifuddin, of course, had a comment on it as well. And as did Guy. And yeah, quite a few other links that we have here that are interesting. And yeah, as you can see, English spelling is difficult in Thailand. From there, we went on to Hua Hin, which is an interesting beach location just south of Bangkok, a few hours drive south of Bangkok. This is where we were staying, which was obviously very, very pleasant. I really did enjoy being next to the beach. A little bit of statistics here on Thailand, so that you're aware of that. The climate in Hua Hin, obviously a little bit different from up north. And then pictures around Hua Hin. And the book that I was sort of reading at this stage was The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, which I think is actually rather important. And this Order for Destruction, which Arthur missed because it was on display in the town hall. And if you haven't read the book recently, go back and read here, you'll find the explanation. It's actually rather relevant, again, to what's happening today. So Song of the Week for me was this thing from Roger Waters, which is a new release of Comfortably Numb. And again, if you haven't seen this, click it. It's interesting. And again, I think there's interesting symbolism in the accompanying video as well. This is a little bit of an update from James Corbett, teaching you how to find broken links when you find links to things that have disappeared because of the Library of Alexandria being on fire and other reasons. this may help you. And I do recommend James's website, James Corbett's website in its entirety. So go there if you're looking for useful information. And another useful skill is to be able to download and keep copies of YouTube videos before they disappear. What else? Yes, you do need to be very aware of what the G20 leaders declared in Bali, because you're not going to like what's coming down the pipe, including all the travel restrictions and obstacles that they're going to put in your way, supposedly for everybody's health, but you know it's got nothing to do with that. And speaking of that, this just shows you what nonsense there is around these masks that they're getting people to wear. And this should be obvious to you, is just psychological warfare against people, to set people up against each other and to instill this climate of perpetual fear in people. So if you were in any doubt, just watch this. It's just a 2-minute clip, and it should be quite clear to you what's going on. This is a very interesting thing. This video that was released in 2012, it's had millions and millions of views by a guy called Louis Lefebvre. And apparently it was the result of 5 years' work. So you may say it's just a cartoon, or like many, you may see that there's plenty of a deeper symbolism in there. So I'll let you look into that and reach out if you want to discuss that. From there, we headed off to Kuala Lumpur. This, in fact, was pretty much the view from my apartment, from the roof up on the apartment. It was a fabulous location we had right in the center of Kuala Lumpur, near the Petronas Towers. Yeah, of course, I had to go back to there to pick up my suitcase that I had left just before all the pandemic nonsense started. And I'm happy to say that I got that. I met up with my friends. And we actually had a tremendous evening together. These are a few interesting videos that, again, I suggest you watch, and they may help you to waken up, or they may give you insights into things that you hadn't known or appreciated, including how much power each of us has as an individual. If you don't like what's going on, then you just need to remove your energy from the system and not cooperate and not support it. So these are all interesting things. And I came back and I did review George Orwell's 1984, which again, I recommend that you go and have a look at. This image actually speaks quite a lot from that. Another interesting podcaster is Joe Bloggs. And do listen to his explanation about FTX. What else have we got? This is interesting also. Whitney Webb is a fascinating researcher. And yeah, speaking of dishonest and unaccountable people, this is a fascinating expose of the sustainability goals of the World Economic Forum. So you want to actually click through and listen to this discussion, which is the first of many that they'll be releasing. And again, there's links below here that you can check. Robert Malone is interesting because he, in fact, is the inventor of the RNA vaccine technology. So you want to listen rather carefully to what he says. And this is his podcast here that you can link through to. And you also probably want to link through to this dilemma of the vaccinated. If you yourself are vaccinated or you know somebody who is, you may want to read this and possibly share it with them, because it does indicate a number of options going forward, including positive options. Yeah, again, more insights into what is on display for people to see, and speak up if you don't like it. These also, again, are more similar things. So check these. They're very clear. Things are very clearly on display. And it's time to speak up or push back if you don't like it. And I conclude here with a very interesting, it's actually a very old joke on the European community and other things, and bureaucracy in general. But click on this if you have not seen it before, or even if you have, it's really good. This is a good review of if you have two cows. And then at the beginning of December, we actually came back, I would say home, in quotes, to Hong Kong. This was up on one of my first days back on the peak. We came back to look around. I did also, just before I left Kuala Lumpur, we did have tremendous evening out with friends in Kuala Lumpur at the Durian shop, which is you see here. And then these are, again, photographs that we took around Kuala Lumpur just before we left. The long read of the week was this thing about structural adjustment and how the IMF and World Bank repress poor countries. And again, if you've not read this or you're under misconceptions, do go and have a look. This is also an interesting article from Alan Farrington. And I'll let you read it. It's the interesting name, Green Eggs and Ham. But it's very interesting, and they distinguish between decentralized finance, DeFi, and the differences between these in this, as you see, this 5-part article. You can check out the article here, or you can listen to Guy reading it. There's a read 1 and read 2, whichever you prefer, or both. In fact, you can use them in combination. Jordan Peterson is a fantastic guy, and you do want to listen to this article, which is Jordan Peterson interviewing Matt Ridley, who is the former science editor of The Economist magazine. And again, what they discuss in this interview should definitely open your mind, and you should definitely be aware of what these highly intelligent people think and what they have uncovered. Carvoia is another interesting character, and he interviews many other interesting ones. And this guy here, Thierry Baudet, is a Netherlands-Dutch politician. I'll let you go through and flick through and follow him. More useful links here. And we end up here with, again, this video which I came across, which in fact is The Secret of Oz, which in fact expands that Wizard of Oz even to yet another synchronization, which I was not aware of, which in fact is that the book relates to the gold standard. And this is something that will come back, and you can click through and you can link, and this video is an explainer as to how that link with the gold standard is there, and the message behind the book, and how that message, in fact, has been hidden and obscured in the movie. So differences between the movie and the book. Then 17th of December, we were sort of reassessing things. This is kind of obviously a wake-up call that I think people need to have. Obviously, we can compare the climate here in Hong Kong with other places. And these are photographs from around Hong Kong. And you should be struck by how deserted the place is. It really is scary how the spirit of Hong Kong has been completely sucked out of the place. In case you missed the wake-up call, you should listen to this guy who is Pascal Najadi, and he is a former US presidential candidate. So he was interviewed by Marty Bent, and I have below the interview here shortcuts that will take you to the relevant part of the interview. So you can watch the interview as a whole by clicking here, or you can watch the various parts which are here below. And I highly, highly, highly recommend that you listen to that. You can also download it and keep a copy, just in case things happen, which they do. And this is an explanation as to how this type of thing happens, because you'll say it's not possible, there would need to be so many people involved. And this is a very simple explanation about how this spectrum of corruption gets in place and how it exists. And another interesting video, this in fact is one from, I think, from a couple of years ago, but it's a review of 1984. And it should definitely make you think. If you have not watched it, then watch it recently. Similarly, also do go and read the report from Iron Mountain if you've not read it. I've mentioned this many times in the articles, but this is again a link to it. And then we have some more discussion here around CBDCs, central bank digital currencies, and this is most important for you to be aware of. And I think you do need to, these are places where you really do need to push back and refuse to accept these things, as in fact the Nigerians have done in their country. Digital ID is another dystopia which is coming down the pipeline, and you want to be very careful about that. Here we talk about ChatGPT, which is AI technology, which has been kind of unleashed on the masses. And yeah, be very, very afraid of what's coming down here. So these are a few examples of what this tool can do, and you will be surprised, including how you can bypass the security controls in it. This is an interesting guy, Michael Hudson. He actually did an interview. He did a lecture in Hong Kong, just in fact as the protests were happening, which is this lecture here, which you can watch in its entirety. But here in this little clip here, he describes basically in 90 seconds how the world works and how the developing world is suppressed by its colonial masters. Oh, this ought to really terrify you. This is a 1 minute, again, a 90-second clip as the chief economist of the European Central Bank basically explains why and how they print money. And if this doesn't terrify you, nothing will. So click here to watch that and be very afraid. And then finishing on a lighter note, these are some interesting videos from 1895 to 1902. You'll find lots of these if you go and have a look. But this first one's interesting because the guy in fact explains the technology behind this and explains how these things can be adjusted and perhaps can be misleading using AI. So anyway, these are interesting to have a look at. And then last week, it was nearly Christmas, and you see here Pacific Place in Hong Kong, again, with almost no people. I mean, it's just scary how empty Hong Kong is, and all the places that we went around Hong Kong, empty, 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 although lots of discussion, lots of construction going on here. This is on the way up to the peak. This is the University of Hong Kong, which is completely demolished as far as I can see and being reconstructed. Here also in Mu Wo, huge construction going on. And I did in this article, it's a bumper Christmas edition. So I gave you lots and lots of stuff to read, including on COVID, including on green dystopia, which is coming, including the next pandemic, which is being planned as we speak. It's called catastrophic contagion. And they did an exercise in Brussels in October, and you can go and read about it if you want to see what they were planning, and they are planning it. And then here, a very interesting topic here to cover the end of the fiat monetary experiment. So these are these articles below here on COVID, some thoughts. This debate, and I say debate in quotes because you should be staggered by the level of participation from the UK politicians during this debate. And ask the question, are these people representing you, or who are they representing? And why was there not something more important for them to be discussing than this on that particular time? Which is pretty much the same view that Neil Oliver says. And this is a 6-minute video, and I recommend that you click through and read it. And as you see, Dr. Malhotra basically is of the same opinion. So do click through and read these. Also, Steve Kirsch did an interview with Malhotra, so that's worth reading. And at last, breaking news, doctors in the UK are finally breaking their silence and speaking out. I do encourage you to go and click here to see their press release, on which there's also a video where they explain what they talk about. And again, I posted again this dilemma of the vaccinated, if you are concerned or you know someone who is. The next one is green dystopia. And like I said, this has been years or decades in the planning. The next thing that we're supposed to believe is an existential threat is this green dystopia. And you should listen to Alex Epstein discussing this with Jordan Peterson. So this is a video you can click. And if you need headlines, click through to this, which is 25 talking points. This is an exercise that took place in Brussels in October called Catastrophic Contagion. And you should click through to watch Ivor's explanation. And you should remember what happened the last time they did an exercise like this, which was called Event 201. You can click through and see this. And basically, it predicted everything that happened in the COVID-19 crisis. So what do you think will happen after this exercise in Brussels? You want to click through and see. This is being propagated by these people who are World Economic Forum global leaders and other global influencers, which they talk about in here as well. Charlie Robinson also picks up on this, and another exercise which is not unrelated, which is called SPARS. SPARS. And he discusses this with another researcher, which I recommend that you watch through this. And if you want to see the document itself, this is the video that explains it, and the document itself that they discuss is here on the Johns Hopkins Institute, where they summarize the conclusions of their exercise. So there you go. And just a reminder that governments, they are supposed to be representing the people and doing what the people wish, not imposing things on the people. So moving on to the Money Masters, this in fact links back to what we discussed around the Wizard of Oz, and a series of interesting things here about the evil that emerges whenever you have interest or you create money as debt, and a lot of ancient wisdom which in fact has been lost. So this is an interesting set of reading that I suggest that you do. And then moving on, other interesting links that I included in this were this interview on the bond markets with Nick Bhatia, absolutely fascinating in terms of what's happening there. Twitter files, good and bad, I think, there, but this is a rather balanced, I think, discussion on what is happening in the Twitter files. And yeah, you want to be looking at international currencies and what will happen between Europe, US, China, Russia, and Zoltan Pozsar of Credit Suisse has some interesting thoughts. And if you link back to what he discussed back in March, basically, I think he was right. So I would tend to put some credence in what he says here. So do click through and read. This is something actually I would never have thought was a thing, but do click here and listen to Dave Cullen from Ireland and see what you think. And then another thing that might make you think, and this is just to wrap up, something different is Ben from Uncharted X. And I suggest you also go through to his channel. You'll find a lot of interesting things that he points out on his channel. And then here at the end, for those of you that have not yet seen what the matrix is, this is the video you want to click on, which is Morpheus explains it as best he can to Neo. And yeah, so just click here and watch. And I have to say, if you don't get it after this, I'm not sure I can do more for you. So that's it. I hope you find this tour of the website interesting. And as I said, if you do want to find the review of the first 6 months of the year, go back and check on the other video, and I'll provide the link below. So best wishes from Hong Kong.